This here, you might remember, is our 1949 Peacock Blue, and it is all apart because I have the busted spoke in the rear wheel. You gotta pull the rear wheel apart, rebuild the hub, delace it, clean it up. Transmission, well, the transmission's coming apart. I'll leave it at that. And you can see oil all over the frame. And it came from were never sealed from the factory heads, which have been spewing oil everywhere since it was new. And early panheads, well, any panheads, never sealed. Early panheads were notorious. You see there's no D-ring of any type, and the gasket was basically a gasket, and they did not have modern chemicals, and they never sealed, and so it's been puking oil its whole life. And so we're going to pull the motor apart and the tranny apart and every nut and bolt on this bike and dip it in our magic goo, because we have little rust issues. This here, I've squirted it down with Gibbs, and this was rusty. Everything on this bike was either loose as a goose. These bolts here were wobbling, like an egg. They're so loose. They actually take cotter pins, and the factory never put the cotter pins in. And so they loosened up. There's no lock washer. The cotter pin, and the factory never did this. This is a factory error. This bike's never been apart. So we're going to rip it down to the bare frame and clean up our little rust issues everywhere. And still leave original patina and original paint, okay? But that way I'll have a bike that won't break on me. This is important. I want to actually ride this motorcycle. I want to not break it. I still need to get the generator loose, or this bolt here, it's frozen. I've been squirting it with Gibbs. I'm going to have to put some heat on it, I think. I mean, it's just frozen. So we got to pull the crash bar off, pull the motor out. I got special goo to stick the heads in once I disassemble them. We just rebuilt this front end and all that sort of stuff, but I'm going to rip it apart. So this is me doing it. If I screw it up, you can blame me. I'm not having anybody else do this but me. This is my little project. This is my very nicest bike. If I can't do my nicest bike, I have a severe problem. I haven't done one of these in over 20 years. So I need to do it myself. So I'm going to do it. And you can't see it on this side, but there's tape here. This is cloth friction tape here. We're going to get new cloth friction tape. Put the cloth friction tape back where it's supposed to be. Document all this. I gotta get some lighting in here. Take special cloth friction tape here. The harness is beautiful. So there's a little circuit breaker board back here, which I can disconnect the rear end from and the front end from. And there's a circuit breaker board back here, and I can disconnect everything and have the harness right here on the switch. So all that's good. When I do get it back together, I am going to take the switch apart and clean it. This stuff, it's this is the reality. It's so old. All the gaskets are dried. If you want it to be right, you have to pull it apart very carefully, clean it, and put it back together. So, as you saw from the green bug, we did have to repaint these cylinders because there was no paint left on them once we got the oil off. I suspect the same thing is going to be true for this. This is not special heat paint, and it just comes off. So once we clean the oil off the cylinders, there's not going to be any paint. So we'll repaint them, I'm sure, and it'll repatina the second we heat it up because we'll put the same paint back on. It just goes right back, and you can't even tell. So we'll get rid of all this nastiness, put it all back. It'll be all nice and clean and wow and bitchin'. And just like, wow, when we get done. So, there it is. This is an update. We have our parts here. We'll check everything out. See where our brake shoes, So all this stuff's going to go in the goo. So you can see what we've done with the 46. We're going to do the same thing with this one. Very carefully clean it. Put it all back together. Here's our tanks. Here's our lovely dash. So all this stuff is all going to go back together and be super clean. And wow, here's our inner primer. You can see how just absolutely this bike is. It's just nasty, nasty. So I got to put all little special parts back in, clean it, de-rust it, make it all happy. But look at the back side of this muffler. It looks beautiful. On the other side, that's our beautiful Burgess muffler. But look at this side here. So I don't have a proper degreasing tank. I had to steam clean this transmission. But look at all the rust on the nuts and bolts underneath the grease. This bike was in heated storage its whole life. And, this is what happens, even when I'm sitting. So I put all this stuff in here. It's all going to go and be very carefully cleaned. Go in the magic goo. And we'll very carefully not hurt any of the original paint, original patina, and get this bike all apart and all back together again. And we're going to do it right here myself. It's going to be a nice long little project. That's okay. And she's going to be super wow and bitching when I'm done. It'll be like, holy fucking God, when I'm done. And it'll be right. And I can ride it and not hurt it. This is to keep everybody updated. But here's a nice good look of a 4950 fender. This here is 4950 only. The Sergeant stripes are 4950 only. And as you saw, this was lighting. This is a new old stock Peacock tip. Kind of hard to find. So here we go. And real interesting here. Some of these had guide, obviously, and some did not. I'm not sure when was what. I have new old stock ones that guide. I've got repo that you can barely see the guide. Here's one on this bike that's never been touched, and there's no guide here. So that's very, very interesting. I just bought a taillight today, the same thing. The original taillight never been apart, and no guide there. I've seen people sand this and take the guide out and actually sand it and take this guide out here and the Harley Davidson here. But very interesting. So unfortunately, this bike was in the hands of someone who didn't really care at one time, and they stole the original lights here. So I put them on, and these are an old stock, and they put a repop oil filter on it. So we're going to go back with a real oil filter and lines. And people tend to steal original parts off original bikes as it goes through their hands. I've seen it many, many times. They steal this little piece, that little piece, and it's greed. That's all it is just plain and simple greed. All they care about is the money. To me, that is an insult to the motorcycle. This is an honor, in my opinion, to be able to allow by the universe to possess and enjoy and care for machines of this caliber, because most of them are chopped and destroyed. And I view this as an honor that the universe has given to me, and it's up to me to care for this. These are my children, and I view them as such. This is my daughter, my son. And when I see that, it fills me with great sadness and disgust. But that was done to this bike. I'm pretty sure I know the man who did it. It was unfortunately passed on. He was a dear friend, even though he did this to this machine. And we'll put it back to rights, put it all back apart. And the only way to make it all blend in, and even though this front end is rebuilt and all that, I'm going to pull it absolutely apart and clean everything. And I won't pull the wiring out of the switches or the handlebar controls because these are working flawless, but I'll pull the little screws out and glue them, or some other screws and glue, whichever. But we'll clean it all up. So about the only thing I won't do is these little end pieces here. There's no way to get them off of this is all like a fiber coating, which will absorb the dew and any moisture and just ruin it. So I can't clean these up really. I might gotta use some Gibbs on them. We'll see what happens. But all this little nuts and bolts and everything, it's all gonna be good. And be all happy back together. So sorry about the long diatribe to everybody who's listening and putting up with me. But there she is. This is our 49 Peacock Blue. And I'm not going to clean the inside of the fender. You follow? There's no reason to risk the original paint. It's extremely nice, but I've discovered this paint has become very soft on this bike, and I don't want to risk chipping it. So I'm just going to clean the outside very carefully and leave the inside material that has been there its whole life there. But the frame itself is going to be very carefully cleaned. I'll put a little Gibbs on the rub from the saddlebags. And there she goes. So when I have other updates, I'll bring them. So I'll probably update when I pull the tranny and motor apart. All this here, this is like an oily Gibbs mixture. So she's been dripping oil. So it is what it is. They're old. This is a 1949. So this bike here is 64 years old. So I'd like to see any of you being young and spry at 64. I'm not young and spry at 50. So, and I understand it just deteriorates the human body every year. Bikes are no different. So it's been sitting, oil's been in it for decades, building up acid, corroding hardened surfaces. I'll be replacing races in the motor and the tranny, and it just have to be very careful over every little nut and bolt as it goes back together and have it just perfect. So we will do so, and she'll be right. And I'll be very happy by 49. So we have other ones waiting. Hopefully the green bug will last for a while. She's still running and happy. And we have over there in the corner the blue 49 waiting. And we will see you guys on the next video. Bye.